It was a cool autumn morning when Eleanor Whitford, matriarch of the Whitford legacy and widow of oil magnate Charles Whitford, stepped out of her black Bentley and into the serenity of St. Mark's Cemetery. The sun had barely pushed through the overcast sky, casting a pale light over rows of silent gravestones. Eleanor, always impeccably dressed, wore a tailored gray suit with a silk blouse, her silver hair tied into a tight, sophisticated bun. Her black gloves and handbag, made of fine Italian leather, added a final touch of wealth and discipline to her appearance. Eleanor had come alone, as she always did on this date, the anniversary of her son Matthew's death. Matthew Whitford had been the pride of the family, charming, intelligent, and poised to inherit the family empire. But a tragic car accident 5 years earlier had taken him from them far too soon. Since then, Eleanor visited his grave each year, never missing the date, always bearing white roses, Matthew's favorite. As she walked the familiar gravel path leading to his headstone, Eleanor noticed something unusual. From a distance, someone was standing by Matthew's grave, a woman. Eleanor's pace slowed. The woman was young, no more than 30. Her skin was dark, her frame slender. She wore what looked like a blue Waitress uniform under a white apron. But what struck Eleanor most was that she wasn't alone. The woman cradled a child, a small, fair-skinned baby boy, nestled against her chest. He couldn't have been more than a year old. Eleanor's brows furrowed. Her heels clicked sharply against the stone path as she approached. The woman didn't look up. She appeared to be crying, her body trembling slightly. "Excuse me," Eleanor said firmly. The woman startled and quickly turned around, clutching the baby tighter. Her eyes widened in panic, but she did not run. "Can I help you?" Eleanor asked, her voice cold but controlled. She glanced at the gravestone and saw the unmistakable Whitford name etched into the marble. The woman wiped her tears hastily. "I'm sorry, ma'am. I didn't mean any disrespect. I come here sometimes, to visit." Eleanor's eyes narrowed. "Visit whom?" "This is my son's grave." "Matthew Whitford," the woman whispered. "Yes, ma'am. I know." An uneasy silence fell between them, broken only by the soft cooing of the baby in her arms. "Who are you?" Eleanor asked. "And why are you crying at my son's grave with a child?" The woman hesitated. Her hands trembled slightly as she adjusted the child on her hip. "My name is Camille," she said finally. "Camille Jordan. I used to work at Evercrest, the hotel near the marina. I was a waitress there." Eleanor remained expressionless. "And what does that have to do with my son?" Camille bit her lip. Her eyes welled again, but she fought to remain composed. "Matthew he was kind to me. When he came to the hotel, he treated everyone with respect. But one night, after a fundraiser, we talked. Really talked. And that was the night everything changed." Eleanor took a step back, her gloved hand tightening around the handle of her bag. "Are you suggesting this child is my grandson?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Camille looked down at the baby. "His name is Samuel. And yes, I believe he is." Eleanor's world tilted. Her heart pounded. She glanced at the child, suddenly seeing something familiar in his profile, a dimple in the left cheek, a curve of the nose that echoed Matthew's. "Why are you only coming forward now?" "Because I was scared," Camille confessed. "I didn't know how your family would react. I didn't want money. I just wanted Samuel to know where he came from. And I wanted to tell you. To tell someone who knew him." Eleanor turned away briefly, pressing her gloved fingers to her forehead. The revelation weighed heavily, and emotions long buried began to surface. "Come with me," she said suddenly, her voice regaining its sharpness. "This isn't the place to discuss it." Camille hesitated. "Where?" "To the manor," Eleanor replied. "We need to talk about everything." She turned, her heels clicking once again on the path, not waiting for Camille to follow. The Whitford estate was nestled in the hills just outside the city, surrounded by private gardens, fountains, and a long gravel driveway that led to a towering wrought-iron gate. Camille had never seen anything so grand in her life. She sat in the back seat of the Bentley, holding Samuel tightly as the driver navigated the winding road. Inside, the manor was even more imposing. Marble floors, gilded frames, and towering ceilings. Eleanor walked ahead, her posture straight, her demeanor unreadable. She led Camille into a sitting room lined with old portraits and plush velvet chairs. A maid brought in tea, and the baby, sensing the tension, grew restless. "You said his name is Samuel?" Eleanor asked, sitting opposite Camille, legs crossed, eyes sharp. Camille nodded. "Yes. I named him after my grandfather. Do you have any proof of what you're claiming?" Camille looked up, hurt flashing across her face. "No DNA test, if that's what you mean. Matthew and I only met a few times. But we spent a night together. I found out I was pregnant a month later. I tried to reach out, but he was already gone." Eleanor stared into her teacup, her thoughts racing. The possibility both frightened and intrigued her. She had grieved her son for years. Could it be that part of him still lived on? "You should have come sooner," she said, her tone softening slightly. "I know," Camille replied. "I just didn't want to be accused of chasing wealth. I only came today because I wanted Samuel to know where his father rested." Eleanor set her teacup down and stood. "We'll need to do a test. But until then, you and the child will stay here." Camille blinked. "Here? At the manor?" "Yes," Eleanor said with finality. "If Samuel is who you say he is, he deserves more than crumbs. He deserves the truth." Camille nodded slowly, overwhelmed. "Thank you." As the maid returned to escort Camille to a guest room, Eleanor remained in the sitting room, staring at a painting of her late son. For the first time in years, she felt something stir within her, a fragile hope wrapped in uncertainty and pain. But one thing was clear. This was just the beginning. Whitford Manor, with all its grandeur and silence, was not accustomed to the presence of a baby. Yet over the following week, the halls echoed with Samuel's giggles, cries, and the soft lullabies Camille sang to him when rocking him to sleep. The staff adjusted with surprising ease, most of them touched by the gentle nature of the young mother and the cheerful innocence of the boy. Eleanor, however, remained distant, not cruel, but reserved. She observed Camille and Samuel from afar, measuring their every movement, every gesture. It was not distrust that kept her cold, but fear. Fear of what it would mean if Camille was telling the truth. She summoned the family doctor, a trusted friend of many years, to perform a discreet DNA test. The samples were collected without much fuss, and Camille cooperated willingly. Still, the wait for the results seemed eternal. During that time, Camille was introduced to aspects of the Whitford legacy she had never imagined. The manor's art collection, the private greenhouse, the family chapel, it was overwhelming. Eleanor offered her a suite in the East Wing, far from the main quarters, to preserve formality. Camille never complained. Her only concern was Samuel. Late one evening, Eleanor entered the library to find Camille there, sitting in a high-backed chair, Samuel asleep against her shoulder. "Do you often read poetry?" Eleanor asked unexpectedly. Camille startled but smiled. "I do. I studied literature in college before I had to drop out." "Why did you leave?" Eleanor inquired. My mom got sick, Camille replied. I had to work. She raised me alone. Didn't have anyone else. There was a long pause. You know, Eleanor said quietly, Matthew never told us much about the women he dated. I think he kept that part of his life private. I always assumed he didn't want distractions. Camille lowered her gaze. He told me he felt caged, like he had no say in the direction of his life. Eleanor's eyes shimmered, not from tears, but from old memories. He said the same to me once. I didn't listen. The Whitfords were not just a wealthy family, they were a symbol of status and tradition. Word had gotten out, as it always does, that a young woman and a child were living at the manor. Rumors started circulating through high society. A love child, a scandal, a threat to the legacy. Tabloids sniffed around. Photographers waited at the gates. Eleanor, protective of her family name, ordered security tightened. One morning, she received a call from her sister, Adelaide, who lived in Charleston. Is it true, Eleanor, that some girl is living in the house, claiming she has Matthew's child? It's being looked into, Eleanor replied. You can't be serious. What will the board say? What will people think? I don't care what people think, Eleanor snapped. If it's true, that boy is all I have left of Matthew. Adelaide scoffed. You always were the sentimental one. But Eleanor was no longer listening. Her mind was already drifting to Camille, the way she sang softly to Samuel, the story she told at dinner, the depth in her eyes. 3 days later, the doctor returned. Eleanor sat alone in the study when he delivered the envelope. Her fingers trembled as she opened it. She read the words once, then twice, then a third time. It's true, she whispered. She stood up, walked down the corridor, and knocked on Camille's door. When it opened, she didn't speak right away. She looked at Samuel, who reached out with tiny fingers toward her coat. He's Matthew's, Eleanor said, her voice cracking for the first time in years. Camille's eyes flooded with tears. I knew it. Eleanor stepped forward and did something no one expected. She placed a hand gently on Samuel's back, her eyes softening. You both belong here. As the truth settled, not everyone was pleased. On the board of Whitford International, whispers turned to threats. Eleanor's authority was being questioned. A child born out of wedlock, especially to a former waitress, was seen as a stain on their image. One board member, Richard Langston, long resentful of Eleanor's influence, called a private meeting. She's lost control, he said to the other members. We need to protect the brand. But Eleanor anticipated the move. She arrived unannounced, walking into the meeting with the confidence of a woman who had built empires. If anyone here believes a child should be punished for the circumstances of his birth, she said, you are welcome to resign. But as long as I breathe, the Whitford legacy will include Samuel. Silence followed. No one dared to challenge her. Despite Eleanor's protection, Camille felt the weight of scrutiny. At a charity event, whispers followed her. Old friends of Matthew eyed her with suspicion. She trapped him, one woman hissed. It's always about the money. Camille kept her head high, refusing to react. But that night, she broke down in the nursery. Eleanor entered quietly and sat beside her. They don't know you, she said. But they judge me anyway, Camille replied. All I ever wanted was for Samuel to know where he came from. I didn't ask for this. You may not have asked for it, Eleanor said, but you're handling it with more grace than any of them could. Camille smiled weakly. Thank you. The bond between Eleanor and Camille deepened. Eleanor began telling stories of Matthew's childhood, his mischief, his dreams. Camille shared tales of her mother, of nights spent waiting tables to pay for medicine, of the hope she clung to during her pregnancy. They were from different worlds, but grief had carved out a shared space. One afternoon, while Eleanor showed Camille the rose garden, she said, "You know, Matthew once said he wanted a boy. Said he'd teach him how to fish." Camille laughed. "Samuel already loves water." Eleanor nodded. "Then we'll take him to the lake next summer. He should grow up knowing those things." As winter approached, Eleanor made an announcement. In a letter sent to close friends and associates, she introduced Samuel Whitford Jordan as the grandson of Matthew Whitford. The Whitford name, the letter read, is not just about bloodlines or wealth. It's about integrity, resilience, and truth. Samuel embodies all three. It shocked many, inspired others, and silenced most. But the storm was not yet over. Because in the shadows, someone was watching, a man with a hidden past, and secrets that could unravel everything. The public announcement had barely settled when Eleanor received an anonymous letter in a plain white envelope. It contained no greeting, no signature, just a single photograph of Camille, visibly pregnant, sitting on a bus bench in a poorer part of the city. Scrawled in bold ink were the words, "You don't know the full story." Eleanor felt a chill. She had stood up to gossip, family, and the board. But this was different. It wasn't about judgment, it was a threat. She brought the letter to her private office and made a call. "Alan," she told her trusted investigator, "I need to know who sent this." Discreetly. That evening, Eleanor approached Camille in the solarium, where Samuel was playing on a mat. "Camille, do you know anyone who might want to harm your reputation? Someone who might not want you here?" Camille looked stunned. "No, ma'am. I left a lot behind when I had Samuel. My ex-boyfriend, Terence, was angry when I refused to name him on the birth certificate. But he wasn't Samuel's father. Why would he want to hurt you now?" "Because he hated seeing me rise," Camille said softly. "He used to say I'd always be nothing. That no rich man would ever see past my uniform." Eleanor's eyes hardened. "Then he underestimated both of us." Alan's investigation uncovered troubling details. Terence Mathis had a record: assault, fraud, intimidation. He had worked briefly at Evercrest Hotel during the same period Camille did. He was fired for threatening another employee. "He's been watching her," Alan reported. "There are signs he's been asking questions. Hanging around places she used to visit." Eleanor was silent for a long moment. Then she stood. "We need to ensure her safety. And the child's. Increase security. Move her room to the main wing." Days later, Terence showed up at the manor's gates. "I need to speak to Camille," he demanded. "I got rights." He was met by the head of security. Eleanor had expected this. "Tell him if he steps 1 foot on this property again, I'll have him arrested." But Terence was relentless. He posted on social media, claiming the Whitfords had stolen his child, that Camille was a liar. The tabloids latched onto it. Camille was devastated. "What if people believe him?" she asked Eleanor one evening. "What if they think I tricked you?" Eleanor took her hand. "Then we tell the truth. Publicly. Together." Eleanor arranged a press conference. She stood beside Camille, poised and unwavering. "Many of you have speculated about the presence of Camille Jordan and her son Samuel in my home," she said into the cameras. "Let me make it plain. Samuel is the biological grandson of my late son, Matthew Whitford. Camille is not a gold digger. She is a mother who raised her child alone with dignity. And I am proud to call them family." Camille, standing with tears in her eyes, added softly, "I never wanted attention. I only wanted my son to know his roots. I hope you will allow us the grace to live our lives in peace." The backlash softened overnight. Alan worked with the police to file a restraining order against Terence. Within weeks, he was arrested for stalking and violating court orders. The noise began to fade. Camille was free to walk the manor grounds without fear. Spring arrived. The roses in the garden bloomed. Samuel took his first steps across the marble foyer, his laughter bouncing off the columns. One morning, Eleanor placed a small box in Camille's hands. "This belonged to Matthew," she said. Inside was a gold pendant engraved with the initials M.W. Camille held it gently. "Thank you." I want Samuel to have it when he's older. He will. And he'll know who gave it to him. Camille, at Eleanor's encouragement, returned to college part-time. She pursued her literature degree, determined to finish what she started. Eleanor brought her to board meetings as a silent observer, slowly introducing her to the business. Some members grumbled, but most saw the transformation happening. This was not just a woman claiming a connection. She was stepping into her role with humility and strength. The community began to see it too. A year later, on the anniversary of Matthew's death, Eleanor, Camille, and Samuel returned to St. Mark's Cemetery. The baby, now walking with chubby, confident legs, toddled up to the headstone and placed a white rose before it. Camille whispered, "We came full circle." Eleanor nodded. "And now we begin again." The two women stood side by side, once strangers, now bound by love, pain, and purpose. A billionaire and a former waitress, joined not by status, but by heart. As they walked back toward the gates, Samuel held both their hands. "A family at last."